And so we now, Karen, can begin the broadcast. Okay, first of all is apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies?
I don't have any, Chair.
Thank you. You have in front of you minutes of the meeting that we held on the 8th of September. May I confirm this is a true record and be signed by myself? Yes? All in favour?
Yes, I agree.
Thank you. Number 3 is disclosure of members' interests. Do any of you have any interest to declare? Okay. All going very well so far. So now we move on to a report on COVID response and recovery. Who is going to take this, please? Okay, Daljit, are you going to speak to this briefly? Okay, well then I will speak to it briefly.
Sorry, Glenn. Apologies, just struggling to get online there. Yes, thank you. Yes, happy to introduce this leader. I think really it just gives an opportunity to update Cabinet on the latest position with management of coronavirus and particularly our recovery. As soon as the report is written, really currently it's a little bit out of date, and as with the announcements yesterday, we have, as has been indicated, being put forward as Tier 2 presently. There is obviously some further work to undertake, but that will take us forward for the time being. It does give a bit more flexibility in terms of people meeting outside, but generally the key message for us is that we look to remain safe, keep our communities safe, and also look as far as possible to protect the NHS, which is vitally important anyway at this time of year. So the report is really as written. It sets out a bit of an update since the last report that we brought to Cabinet and then through the scrutiny process. So there's quite a lot of detail in there around the different aspects, including public health and support for vulnerable people in our communities, particularly in care homes, etc., and people who live in the community. There's some information in there around our education position and the information around children's services. We have, as you know, wherever possible, maintained our school provision. I would just like to compliment schools on that, and obviously teachers and the unions who've enabled that to happen. It's very important that in terms of our Communities Together work, where we've looked at our shielding arrangements, that we continue to support vulnerable people in our communities, and that work is ongoing. So really the report is as written. It's a brief update in terms of our current position, and I'll pass over to you, Leader, if you would like to add anything.
Yeah, thank you very much. I would actually like to just echo what you've said, Daljit, and say thank you to everyone that's been directly and indirectly involved so far. I particularly want to thank our executive staff who have been a tremendous support to me personally over the last 3 to 4 weeks with COVID, and particularly to Kelly Angus. I'd like to also thank everyone involved in the schools and the difficulties that COVID has caused there. In our care homes, which have been terribly difficult for people who have been in care homes, our residents there who haven't been able to have the normal dialogue and conversations with family. It's been very, very difficult for them, but the staff have been great. So can I thank the staff who work in our care homes? Can I thank our enforcement teams who have had to enforce a bit, but primarily they have been there to help and advise. And that's been very important. Communities Together has been hugely important, working with people who need help the most during this. and a whole range of other people who've done so much. And I'd also like to thank my cabinet, who have been very supportive and have helped through this as well. We are at a difficult stage now. We know we're in tier 2 today, and I think that is quite sufficient for us in Northumberland. They're tough enough already, these restrictions, and I certainly would not want to see anything tougher. And I think that we need to look carefully at a Northumberland plan, which will, should there be the threat of tier 3 that looks like it might be coming towards us, that we are prepared for that, because I do not think the tier 3 restrictions are necessary for our county as a whole. However, having said that, we will continue to be advised by public health experts, and that will always be that will always be the key important thing, taking public health first, but we must take people with us as well in all of this. So a big thank you to everyone that's been involved, and without whose help we wouldn't have managed this awful situation as well as we have in the county. Oh, and I should also, say thank you to our communications team, who have been very good in getting the message across, very good on the website and all the information there, to Liz Morgan, our public health officer, who's been working very closely with comms. So thank you, honestly, to everyone that's been involved. We're not out of it by a long way yet, but without all of that help and expertise, we would have been in a much worse position. Would anyone like to make any comments or ask any questions on this particular paper? Okay, if not, then can I take you to the recommendations, which are, and I'm afraid I have to read them out, that the Cabinet is recommended to note the ongoing impact of the coronavirus emergency on the County Council, to acknowledge the continued work undertaken so far by the Council, to agree to receive further reports on the work being undertaken by the Council, particularly in the light of new local and national restrictions, which were introduced recently, and to invite the overview and scrutiny committees to examine updates on response and recovery plans. Is there a proposer? Thank you, Councillor Watson, seconded by Councillor Oliver. Are you all in favour? Yep, that's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. We move on now to paper B, which is the Northumberland Climate Change Briefing. I'd just very quickly like to introduce this. It's been about a year and a half when we first stood outside and met campaigners in the sunshine, and we said, and we committed then, that we would declare a climate change emergency. We did not need to be petitioned. We would do this of our own accord, and that's what we did. We worked up an action plan. We have included a steering group who work with us closely. We have had dedicated officers working on this to produce what you see in front of you today. As important, we have now in this paper outlined some much larger next steps in the role that we are taking to help on our work on climate change in the county. So I would just say thank you to everyone that's involved, and I would also say thank you to Rachel Bruce, who is our new communications officer dealing primarily with climate change. The amount of work that she has done with the community is actually enormous. So thank you very much for that, Rachel. And it is the community that we need to keep with us if we're going to make these next steps work. So I'll pass over to, I think it's Rick O'Farrell who's going to take us through this. Rick.
Yes. Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members and everybody else. The report just gives a fairly detailed update on progress on the strategy to achieve net zero carbon for the county. There's a couple of key areas of the report I'd just like to highlight, Chair. It describes 7 priority action areas on pages 3 to 6, and these cover areas as diverse as transport, carbon sequestration, and renewable energy generation. And we're seeking members' endorsement of those 7 priority areas. The report also includes at section 5, which starts on page 15, a new proposal that we adopt 6 policy recommendations. The effect of these, if agreed by Cabinet, will be to effectively mainstream climate change and carbon considerations into all the work of the Council. So all major decisions made by the Council, all our policies, all our procurements will be made against the background of considering the impact on carbon. And the objective, wherever possible, would be to make every policy decision, every acquisition that we make, every procurement, carbon neutral at worst, carbon negative at best. The balance of the report describes the progress that we've actually made on a whole range of initiatives, including the district heat network feasibility studies, electric vehicle charging, improving the energy performance of our social housing, and a whole range of transport projects. So the report is seeking endorsement of the priority areas, the policy objectives, a small financial ask, Chair, in respect of work to continue on the district heat networks. And I'll just take any questions. The rest of the report speaks for itself, Chair.
Yeah, thank you very much. Before I take questions, I believe this went to Corporate Services and Economic Growth Scrutiny Committee yesterday. I'm not sure we've got the chairman of that there, but I think you've all had a copy of their thoughts, which is to advise Cabinet that it's supported the recommendations. So before we get on to the recommendations, are there any questions for Rick or any points that anyone would like to raise? Nick, did you have your hand up there?
I didn't, but I'll just make the same point that we made yesterday. I mean, it's a phenomenal piece of work, this, and it's great that we're able to make so much progress even during COVID. And it's really important work because this climate change work forms an integral part of our economic recovery. And as we try and rebuild our economy in Northumberland, the climate change sector with forestry and all the work in Blythe and reopening the Northumberland rail line and all of the economic regeneration along that line, it's all essential stuff to building a more prosperous economy.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Okay. Yes, Wendy.
I would just like to say the report is excellent as well, Glenn. And the glass recycling and the food waste, that would be amazing. We're so behind other regions in this.
Thank you very much. Jeff Watson.
Yeah, just to add a little bit, I mean, I think I'm involved with the area of outstanding natural beauty, as everyone knows. And I think we really welcome this report, especially about the forestry and the savings that we're making or trying to save carbon in that area. It's really exciting stuff, and I think we're doing a really good job. And I can see Northumberland actually leading the way here nationally, so I'm really pleased and I'm very chuffed.
Thank you very much. I would agree with you completely. I think Northumberland are very much leading the way in the north of England, and I think nationally as well. We've shown from small schemes like the free tree for every household, which was oversubscribed within 4 days, and all the work that Rachel is doing with schools and so on, to the bigger projects like the heat source pumps and some of the major points within this action plan show that we are taking this very seriously indeed. And the fact that we are committing, as Rick said, to make sure that everything we do now as a council is it needs to be checked against our action plan is a very significant step. So thank you all very much indeed for your support with this. And I need to now, if there are no more questions, go to the recommendations. And again, forgive me, I have to read these out.
Glenn, I have been trying to speak there. You haven't seen
Oh, sorry, John.
Yeah, I was just going to make the comment that, this is definitely not got to be seen as anything that's anti-business. It's pro-business. My area actually has Kielder Forest in it, and Kielder Forest is actually producing trees at an amazing rate, actually. Over 1,100 tons a day are growing, and, that's sustainable. The other thing I want to point out is, we're not in this alone. We've got to take the public with us. But there's also the national park involved here. Farming sometimes gets knocked a bit about carbon and emissions, but you've also got to remember that we've got some of the largest peat areas in the country in Northumberland, and that is even better than trees for your carbon sequestration.
Yeah, absolutely. Good. Well, thank you very much indeed for that discussion. Can I take you to the recommendations, which is that we note the progress made against the Climate Change Action Plan, to endorse all the priority action areas, to approve the allocation of financial resources of £69.3 thousand, the revenue required to continue the heat mapping work that we've started from the Regeneration Reserve Development Fund, to note and consider policy recommendations detailed in section 5 of this report, namely that each service area has been asked to produce an enhanced service plan, which includes the requirement for every service in the council to consider what actions and initiatives they could take to contribute to carbon reduction and sustainability ambitions, so that climate change forms an integral part of all our service planning processes, be it in order to ensure councillors make informed decisions when considering the climate change implications of a proposed policy coming to Cabinet and full council. It will be necessary to undertake a carbon assessment for each policy decision. The details of how such a process will be operated and resourced will be provided in the Climate Change Action Plan 21 to 23, where approval will be sought to put this into place with a financial starting date of April 2021 to coincide with the new financial year. A new procurement corporate social responsibility policy is being developed by the procurement service, which will seek to reduce carbon emissions where financially viable through our commission services and the council supply chains. The details of this policy will be brought to Cabinet in a separate paper. It will be necessary to review the council's salary sacrifice staff incentive schemes so that we recognise the environmental costs associated with some goods and services, and to ensure we offer sustainable options. Our aim in this is not to limit choice, but rather to encourage and support staff to make more sustainable options. To help reduce the carbon impact and financial cost of business mileage, there should be a virtual option for all meetings, unless deemed inappropriate. This will allow officers, councillors, external partners and residents to attend meetings without the requirement to travel. And finally, it would be beneficial to conduct carbon emission evaluations on each of the council's new housing projects. These evaluations will consider, in line with cost, affordable housing and other priorities, how we build energy efficiency measures into new projects to prevent expensive future retrofitting. Note that further revenue and capital funding requirements will be identified to support the council's climate change activities through the wider budgetary process being undertaken to develop the council's medium-term financial plan for 21-22. Those are the recommendations. You'll have a proposer. John Riddle, did you propose those? Yep. Seconded by Wendy Patterson. Thank you. All in favour, please. That's unanimous. So thank you very much indeed for that that discussion and that excellent paper.
Thank you.
We now move on to another very important piece of work, which is to, on the back of our climate change action plan, to look at glass recycling by household. This is something that is we used to, I think the county council did years and years ago, certainly some district councils did, but it's something that we haven't done, but something that we want to do. Part of the government's initiatives to increase recycling and over the coming years has been to look at food waste and glass and so on. Until we get the full recommendations and financial support from government, we can't go into food waste just yet, but we are wanting to try with glass to see if we can make more of this and to reduce the glass that's going into grey bins. So this is a trial, and I'm going to ask Paul Jones to take us through this paper. Paul.
Thank you, Chair. Just in terms of the paper, it's two parts. The first part's obviously looking at the modelling work that's been undertaken, looking at the longer term strategy for Northumberland. Our existing strategies served us well. It stepped back in 2003 and ran till 2020, but clearly we need to move forward now. We can't be complacent. We need to enhance and then continue to improve our services, and to make sure that the way forward that we choose aligns with government thinking. And the government's recently put forward its own resources and waste strategy that sets out some fundamental shifts in thinking. So it includes separate collections of glass from government. It also includes the need for a wider range of plastic materials to be collected than is currently the case in Northumberland, and also things such as cartons, food and beverage containers, as well as most fundamentally food waste collections being a separate collection. So we've gone through a very detailed modelling exercise. We've worked with the Waste Resources Action Programme and specialist consultants Eunomia to look at a whole host of different configurations using best practice elsewhere in the UK to determine what is the best way forward for Northumberland. And all of that work's been distilled down into the table on page 11, table 4, which identifies that there are 3 key options waste forward that achieve a 50% plus recycling ambition, which is one of the key objectives of the County Council and also government policy. And of those 3 options, the preferred one is option 1C. And option 1C is a expansion and builds on our existing recycling services. It basically would involve the additional collection of a wider range of materials within the existing recycling bin over time as we improve and change the infrastructure required for the processing of that material. It also includes the provision of a separate collection and a separate container for the monthly collection of glass and glass bottles and jars, and then a weekly separate collection of food waste that would be taken through an anaerobic digestion process to generate energy. All of those 3 key options also require to try and reduce the costs overall to move the general residual waste collection arrangements from a fortnightly to a 3-weekly collection. And that's clearly very important in terms of reducing the number of collections undertaken and the cost associated and an environmental impact associated with that. And that's something that we're keen to take forward. Other local authorities have done that, and it's something that the government has considered as well, and we expect to hear something as part of their feedback when their strategy is finalised in the coming year. What we're proposing to do in terms of next steps is that the intention is that this is a progressive rollout of the new arrangements. So we're proposing that we undertake as the first step of those progressive next steps is a glass collection trials. We're looking at undertaking that across 4,000 households, so in 4 separate areas, 1,000 properties in each area. These have been decided on an operational basis by staff, looking at the demographics of those areas so that they're consistent and they give us a statistically proportionate result in terms of how that would then roll out if it was taken across the whole county. The close to the depots, they have clear boundaries, so it's quite clear if you're in the area and you're not, in terms of just the communications and the provision of that. So we're looking to undertake that glass collection trial using a smaller wheel bin on a monthly collection cycle. Clearly moving to a monthly collection cycle for that might be a little bit confusing for people, so we have to get the communications on that right. And part of the communications activity is to incentivise people on the scheme to subscribe to a free text messaging service, where basically we will give them an advanced warning of the collection taking place the day before, just to remind them to get the bins out. And we're looking for the capital funding to take that forward, and the revenue funding. So it's £43,000 revenue cost for the 12-month scheme and a £62,000 capital scheme to purchase the wheel bins that we'll put in place to support that. Both of those funding requirements have already been identified within the council's medium-term plan, so it is about identification and allocation of that funding that's already been identified there. Clearly, we can't wait for the government to determine the strategy entirely, so this is why we're taking forward these next steps. But clearly, the level of funding required to implement The whole of the new arrangements is very significant, and that is something that we do need to wait for until the government finalises its waste strategy, concludes the legislation, puts that in place, which we expect to be undertaken during 2021. And it's at that point we'll be able to make those key longer-term decisions in terms of the way forward for Northumberland, but based on the modelling that we've undertaken and based on the findings of these pilot schemes that we're now proposing to progress in year. So that's where we're at, and thank you very much, Chair. Happy to take any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. Before any questions, we've got Councillor Jeff Reid, who's Chairman of Communities and Place Scrutiny, that looked at this a few days ago. Jeff, are you on?
I'm here, Leader. Yeah.
Yep.
I hope you enjoy your time in the big chair. And as far as the report's concerned, the committee thought it was, as usual, well researched, well developed, well written. We did probe quite a lot. I think you were there, you'll have seen. We did ask some awkward questions, and as usual, Mr. Jones was able to answer them all. So the committee's got a fairly optimistic view that this will work out quite well. I think the only thing that we mentioned or brought up was we thought the staff doing this would need to have the appropriate health and safety equipment, ear defenders, you know, I don't know, heavier coats in case of broken glass and all the rest of that stuff. But I think that the team had already thought of that, but it was just that we kind of teased that out just to show that, you know, we have been thinking ourselves about this, and we support the recommendations and hope it works well. I think at the end of the piece, what I was more concerned about was whether the money would actually be there, because I think you all know that I've got this fear that we're moving forward as if it was last year rather than this year. Then collection, you know, money collection rates could be down. The government could run out of money. There's a lot of things outside of our control. But the committee certainly wished the project well.
Thank you very much, and congratulations for not mentioning your book. Can I pass over to any questions?
You brought it up, Leader. You can find it if you want to buy one.
Yes, thank you. Paul, can you just touch on this question of that Councillor Reid's committee brought up about sufficient care and attention for the staff involved in this in terms of noise and so on?
Yeah, we have had very close dialogue with all of the staff involved in the service to recruit volunteers to undertake the collections, because they'll be doing it on overtime on a Friday as well. But a key consideration of that is the health and safety aspects of the collections, which have been a prime consideration. We've involved our corporate health and safety team to support us with that. And one of the key issues is clearly the noise. And as part of that, the staff are going to be using specialist noise cancelling personal protective equipment that basically helps deaden the noise and reduces the noise that they incur, but still enables them to listen to the environment in which they're working. Because clearly, if you just have normal bigger ear defenders on, what we don't want is people then being not attuned to the environment they're working in and stepping out into live traffic, for example, from the back of a bin wagon. So it gives them the best of both worlds in terms of deadening the noise, but also being able to communicate with each other and to hear some of that background noise as well. But it is something we are going to keep a very close eye on and work with the teams over that. Okay, thanks for that. Yes, Jeff Watson.
Paul, I mentioned to you the last time about space for these bins in some particular houses where there are terraces, for example. And I know you assured me then that you were going to take it into account. You just assure me again that you have, and that it's all, you know, people are going to be able to have the space to put these new containers.
Yeah, the containers and the public participation is a key aspect of any recycling and waste management service. So that's why we've selected the type of containers that we have to try and minimise the number of containers overall that people require. So there's more materials commingled in a single bin, for example, for your recycling bin. But clearly, not every household can take a wide range of containers, so there's always going to be some bespoke arrangements for those particular properties that are unable to accommodate it. And for those, we already, in our existing recycling services, for example, provide separate containers for some properties. We still undertake some sack collections in some very particularly difficult premises, some of the historic town centres where they just don't have access to storage within the property or externally to the property. So it is very much a horses for courses, but we try and maximise and encourage the maximum participation levels and offer the service to as many people as we possibly can.
Thank you very much. Councillor Riddle. I think you... Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I've got it now. I think my only real concern here, Paul, is the 3 weekly emptying cycle. It's pretty easy at the moment for people to remember that 1 week it's recycle and the next week it's normal bin. So I think it's probably going to be an ongoing message about the 3 weeks thing for the glass, and whether you're just going to continue to do that by text message is probably the best way. But I think that's my only real concern. The other question was, you know, when you chose these areas, I think you've chosen them across all sort of areas of the county, have you? What was your criteria for this?
So we were looking at what overall number would give us a statistically valid outcome for the trial. So the advice from our consultant support was 4,000 households would do that. We then looked at the operational aspects of that. So doing it in terms of 1,000 household per day is a reasonable collection. That's a full day's work for the teams, enabling us to do that in terms of on a Friday, because our staff work a 37 hours week at the moment over a 4-day period. So working overtime on a Friday enabled us to have that additional effectively resilience within the service. The 4 depots that we chose, there was a significant number of staff in each of those depots that were willing to work the Friday, so we were confident that we could sustain that activity right through the whole year. We chose areas in Alnwick, Bedlington, Morpeth and Hexham because of the demographic arrangements in those areas were representative of the wider community that we're looking to serve, and also they were close to the depots to reduce the actual cost of the transportation activity. And I think most fundamentally as well, there were areas within those settlements that were quite easily defined in terms of it's this housing estate, everything on this side of the main road is going to be in the collection cycle. So it was much easier in terms of just the communications for both staff and residents as to who was on the collection rounds and who wasn't as part of that.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions or queries on this?
Glenn, I think you can't see me. I think it's Veronica.
Hi, Veronica.
I did have my hand up, yeah. It was really, to be honest, like Councillor Riddle, I was interested to know what was the criteria, because I was going to say I'm delighted to see actually that the glass recycling is being considered, even if it's only a trial basis. I'm a resident of Castle Morpeth, and Castle Morpeth in the old district councils did have glass recycling, and I think it's been sorely missed. So I am pleased to see that we're at least trialling it. Like Councillor Riddle, I was interested to know why all towns hadn't been included. I'm happy with that answer. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Wendy Patterson.
Leader, Paul, sorry I jumped the gun a little bit. I was so anxious about the trade refuse, glass recycling, etc., that I came in too early on that. I think it's brilliant. I'm absolutely delighted about the glass recycling. I just wondered if we could just maybe just talk a little bit more about the food waste. I mean, my son and daughter-in-law live in Hertfordshire, and they've been doing food waste, I think, about 5 or 6 years. So I just wondered why we were so far behind with this.
Yes, thank you, Paul.
For food waste at the moment, a lot of local authorities obviously still rely on landfill disposal for their waste. Northumberland's some time ago, back in 2009, developed as part of its contractual arrangements an energy from waste facility that basically takes that food waste as part of the general residual waste stream and actually processes that to generate electricity for the national grid. So in that respect, we're ahead of the game in terms of we recover the heat value from and the calorific value from that residual waste that isn't currently recycled. But clearly, food waste has a higher benefit if it's put through anaerobic digestion. You get more energy. You also get a soil improvement material that you can put back onto agricultural land. So that is something that both the government and the county council thinks is an improvement and an enhancement to the way forward. But there's very significant costs involved in taking forward that service. And for us, because we already have a good arrangement for that through the Energy from Waste facility, that makes it even more difficult for us because we're not having to take it from landfill. We've already got it out of landfill to move that forward. So we have been looking at the modelling work, looking at how we would develop that going forward. It does require significant investment in new vehicles because you have to collect that material separately, significant investment in containers, and significant investment in the processing arrangements for that material. We're actually now in a position within the North East region where anaerobic digestion capacity is available at a number of facilities. So that's something that has enabled us to bring this forward now as a viable proposition for us.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, we are behind as a country, I think, in terms of things like deposit schemes for bottles. In Europe, they are miles ahead of us. So I know the government, I'm sure the government are working on this as fast as they can, but we do need some guidance and actually some money to kickstart the even greater schemes that we would like to do in Northumberland. Okay, anybody else? In that case, may I take you to the recommendations, which are to note the key findings of the waste service modelling work that's been undertaken, to note that the modelling work has shown that continuation of alternate weekly commingled and refuse collections with the addition of monthly collection of glass and weekly food collection meets the obligation of the resources and waste strategy and achieves the council's recycling ambition of a plus 50% recycling rate. Notes that the resources and waste strategy is subject to further consultation and the preferred approach in Northumberland may change once the final obligations and arrangements for funding support are known. And finally, approves the introduction of a 12-month curbside glass recycling trial to test the modelling assumptions and long-term viability of adding glass to existing curbside collection arrangements. The estimated cost to roll out a trial to approximately 4,000 properties covering 4 different areas in order to provide statistically significant and demographically representative sample is £43,000 of revenue to be funded from the Transformation Reserve and capital of 62,000 to purchase the containers for which the capital provision has already been made in the medium-term financial plan. Is there a proposer, please, for those recommendations? Yeah, proposed by Richard Dodd and seconded by Nick Oliver. So thank you very much indeed for that. We now move on to Borderlands. I'm only simply going to say, because we've got Janice here, who's the expert, how exciting this project is, and I'm still learning about it. But I think it is hugely important for our county, and I'm really grateful to the staff, particularly Janice, who's worked so hard on this. Janice, over to you.
Thanks, Glenn. Yeah, so this report's really starting to get us finally into approval and into sort of seeing things happening on the ground. Most of the content of this report relates to the fact that Northumberland County Council are the accountable body for the funding that's going to come through Borderlands on the English side of the deal, which equates over the next 10 years to £200 million. So as in that capacity as being the accountable body, we need to, the way that we manage ensuring that we're robustly controlling that investment coming in and going back out to project sponsors, is we put those projects on the English side into the capital programme. And that means that we can then use the capital strategy group to help make sure that we're monitoring the spend appropriately. The money comes in from government and we then disperse it through grant funding agreements to project sponsors. So there's no actual financial implication for the council, but we just need the capital programme processes to help us manage the throughput of that resource. And interestingly, the first 2 projects on the English side, the only 2 projects, in fact, on the English side that have thus far been approved are Ardgeffran Distillery. Well, it's about to be approved, hopefully, and Alnwick Garden. We're hoping that'll be approved within this financial year, and Alnwick Garden, Lily Dorai. We hope to have a deal. Normally, the deal document and would specify all the capital programme elements, and they'd all be added at the same time. We expect that now to happen in February next year. and we're working on all the business case at this point in time. But because these two have been fast tracked, and there's another one for Carlisle Station Gateway that will come through perhaps later this year, we're having to add those to our capital programme now because they're starting to spend hopefully in this financial year. So so you will start to see bizarrely things from Cumbria in our capital programme, but it's to allow us as accountable body to manage that resource. So that's the first element, Glenn. And the second element is, again, in the context of the item that you've just been discussing, the climate change, is a really exciting one. We're the first sub-region in the country that's been asked by government to co-produce a master plan, an energy and a clean growth master plan for the whole of the Borderlands area. And if I just emphasise that the Borderlands area is bigger than Wales, it demonstrates the kind of scale of what we're trying to deliver. As part of that energy master plan, there will then be sub-action plans related to smaller localities. We think there'll be 3 or 4 of those for Northumberland. That's how detailed they'll get into. So it'll be kind of probably akin to our local council, our local area council areas, that kind of approach to really drive into some of the projects. But we're at the first phase is to do a Borderlands-wide energy master plan. So we received a Section 31 grant, which essentially is a capital allocation from government. But that gave us sufficient latitude to allow us to do some revenue swap within our accounts. Again, no financial implications for the council. All the money is recoupable. It's just we're moving the money around between capital and revenue. The investment itself has come from government. And there's around, linked to the Energy Master Plan, within the Borderlands deal, there's around £30 million worth of investment that can subsequently then be unlocked to deliver across the Borderlands area. So that's kind of, it's a rather technical document at this stage, Glenn, but we're over the next 2 or 3 months, you'll start to see other projects coming through and other programme areas coming through, with working back from that February timeline to get to the deal, which is a contractual arrangement with the government, which means that we have got money assigned to individual projects and programmes.
Good. Lovely. Thank you very much for that, Janice. Any questions? No? Everyone happy? Okay. So can I take to the recommendations, which is to approve the addition of Alnwick Garden, Lily Dorai and Ardgefryn distillery schemes to the Council's capital programme for the reasons that Janice has outlined, and note that these projects will be fully funded from Section 31 Government Growth Deal Investment Fund grant awarded by the UK Government. And secondly, to recommend Council approve a revenue budget of 1.1 million for the Energy Master Plan project, and subsequent environment of 1.1 million of revenue budget in 2020 to 21 from an existing revenue budget for the cost of borrowing to fund the project. This proposal has a net nil cost to the council as detailed in the report. So could I have a proposer for those, please? Proposed by Councillor Riddle and seconded by Councillor Watson. All in favour, please? Yeah, so thank you very much indeed, Janice, and you know, it really is an exciting time for us with Borderlands. So yes, Nick.
Chair, just I'm not sure procedural thing, but we didn't on the previous item on the glass recycling. We had a proposer and seconder, but we didn't vote, and I don't know whether technically we're required to do that. Apologies.
Oh, goodness, have I made a mistake? I'm really sorry.
I think it's unlike you, I know, but I just thought I'd better, before we get to the end of the meeting and find that.
Is it excitement about Borderlands rushed to audience?
Well, I'm most grateful to you, Councillor Oliver. Karen, tell me, did I make a mistake?
I don't think you did, Chair. I think the intent was clear that members were happy with the recommendations.
Yeah. Apologies for highlighting that in that case. I'll probably get sacked now.
Thank you very much for disrupting that one, Councillor Oliver. Good. So did we take the vote? We'll better do it just for Councillor Oliver. All in favour of the
100%. Thank you, Janice. Brilliant report.
Yeah, it is a brilliant report and a very exciting time. And thank you very much, Janice, for that.
No problem.
Can we move on now, please, to the Council Tax Support Scheme for 21-22? Councillor Oliver, a brief introduction, perhaps?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so the the current scheme is basically prescribed by government that pensioners on low incomes receive a 100% discount on their council tax, and working age claimants receive a 92% discount on their council tax, and together these discounts cost the council £26.6 million is spent on providing this very important support. We are I think the second most generous scheme in the LA7 area, and the people that are required to pay typically, I mean, this is just an example, it depends on the size of the house obviously, but the 8% payment amounts to about £6.50 a month for a single person in a Band A house. We introduced this scheme 2 years ago, and the proposal before us today is to continue the existing scheme, so no changes. It's worth pointing out a couple of things. First of all, this year we've had some money from government in terms of COVID funding to provide additional support to the people that are particularly low incomes or claiming, and so that support has basically given people up to £150. If their bill is less than £150, i.e., they're being given 100% relief, or if the bill is more than £150, i.e., their council tax is greater than £1,875, then they would receive £150. And so that's meant 13,000 people have had 100% grant, i.e. they've had no council tax to pay this year. That's used 2.2 million of the funding that we received from government, and it's expected, and although this does depend on what happens between now and March, it's expected that we'll have about 1.1 million left to apply to next year. So although we're not proposing to change the scheme as it stands currently, that additional money will be used to support people in this position. So this will effectively give them an expected discount of 97.5%, which would amount to roughly sort of £2.50, I think, per month in a Band A house for a single person. So that support will be used in that way, and so really that's kind of, I think, probably summarizes the position. So just to reinforce that, the scheme we are proposing to keep the same as has been for the previous 2 years.
Thank you very much. Chris Hand. Chris, are you there?
Sorry, Chair. Yes, I am there. Yes, I don't think there's anything for me to add, Chair. I think Councillor Watt has outlined the scheme in some detail.
Okay, that's good. Thank you very much indeed. Any questions for either Nick or for Chris? Okay, well, I found that very interesting, and I think it's very welcome news for those people that most need help. So thank you for that. Thank you both. If there are no questions or queries, can I take you to the recommendation, which is thankfully just a very short one this time. You'll be glad to hear that Cabinet has recommended County Council to approve the Council Tax Support Scheme attached in Appendix 1 to be adopted as the Council's local scheme for 21-22. Is there a proposer, please?
Chair, can I just ask you to note the scrutiny recommendations as well on this report?
Of course. And yes, so I can tell you that this report went to Corporate Services and Economic Growth Scrutiny Committee yesterday, and the committee agreed that it supported the recommendation. I don't think we have a representation from that committee, but that was their recommendation anyway, that they supported this. So with that, we have a proposer, Councillor Watson, and seconder, Councillor Jones, was it? Or someone seconded? Yes. Can you show by hand if you are all in favour, please? Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. So the next one is number 8, which is the new capital proposals, and there's some very interesting proposals in here. And I'm going to ask Neil Bradley to introduce these, and then I'll take Cabinet members' comments after you've spoken to each one, if that's all right, Neil.
That's great. Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, I'll run through them and I'll pause just at the end of each one. There's four proposals from the Capital Strategy Group this month. The first one is in relation to the Northumberland line and the ground investigation works that are a key component of the early stages of this project. Clearly, they're crucial in terms of understanding the various sites that we're working with for the Northumberland line, and they facilitate the design stage, which comes next after this. There was an original budget put aside for this of just under £2 million, 1.96 million, and it is to cover both the on-track ground investigation works and the off-track ground investigation works. The on-track works came in at a cost which was broadly what was expected at around £750,000, which left about 1.2 million for the off-track works. But since the programme was initially agreed, there's been some additions to it, which mean that when the team have gone out to procurement, the actual value of bids that's come in has been higher than was expected initially because of those changes to the programme. The bid that's come in and that is keen to be accepted is around about 2.1 million. So we've got a budget shortfall of 870,000 on this. The proposal in front of you is to draw funding down from the already agreed budget for the Northumberland Line scheme within the Council's programme, but we will be going back to the Department of Transport to try and recover that through Project Speed, but there isn't a guarantee of getting that. So at this point, the Council would be underwriting the risk of that, but it is a key component of the scheme, and that's why the recommendation is in front of you here.
Okay, thank you. Richard Wearmouth.
Thank you, Chair. So this is really important that we approve this today to make sure that we continue to make rapid progress on the delivery of the Northumberland line. The final business case is in with DfT. We're going now into the tunnel, so to speak, as they describe the EU negotiations in terms of finalising the package of support from government, and I'll be speaking with the folks in Westminster later on today about some of this. Actually, we're making great progress. We just need to make sure that we are speedy in these works, and this will enable us to do that.
Good, thank you very much. So we had speedy and tunnel. Let's
keep us on track, Glenn. Come on.
Stay on. That's what I was going to say. Thank you for that. No, it's a wonderful scheme, and you know.
And you're going to green light it.
Yes, and very much so. Councillor Oliver, thank you.
Thank you. I remember when I was first became a councillor, and apologies if you've heard this before, but I was approached by a resident in my ward who is an economist and was a big player in the regeneration of Newcastle around the in the 80s and 90s, and he said the single best thing you can do as an administration in the next 4 years is get the Northumberland railway line reopened in terms of economic transformation, and I think that it is, and it's been described as the most transformative public transport project in the northeast, and I think it is both of those things, and it's just wonderful to see it progressing and getting to a point where it looks like it's going to become a reality very soon.
Absolutely. Thank you very much indeed. Yep, no other comments on that one. So could we move on to the 189?
Yep, no problem there. Yes, yep. So this one relatively straightforward. So the residential development that's taking place at Chapelview in East Cramlington, the developers have been required to give a Section 106 contribution towards that scheme, which will be used for highway improvements in the vicinity of the Moor Farm roundabout. The recommendation here is simply to accept that Section 106 contribution into the medium-term financial plan so it can be used. It's intended to be used for safety improvements and electronic signage, which assists with management of queues in the run-up to the roundabout. So that's probably all there is to say on that one, Chair. Relatively straightforward.
Yeah, it is straightforward. Thank you for that. I mean, it's good to see that we are getting some Section 106 money actually put into making our roads safer, and that's really important. Okay, thanks, Neil. Next one.
So the next one is the improvements to the winter services fleet systems that are in operation around particularly the gritting service. As a bit of a technophobe myself, I found this one a very interesting read, and it's enhancement of the technology that operates within the gritters themselves and in relation to the planning of the gritting routes. So the proposal is to get a new system in which will improve the route design for gritting and will actually control within the vehicles the width of the salt spreading as well. There are three main benefits to this. I mean, one is clearly efficiency and value for money, because we should use less salt in gritting the routes. But particularly as well, there should be considerably improved health and safety around the operation of the vehicles, because the drivers in essence will be the satellite navigation is of such a degree in the salt spreading automation that really all they have to do is drive the van now. There's no manual intervention required from the driver at all within the gritting process. Additionally, in terms of resilience of operation, broadly anybody who is authorised to drive the heavy vehicles now will be able to drive the gritters. They don't need specific training within the gritting process itself. So aside from the value for money part of this scheme, it does help with resilience in the delivery of winter gritting overall. The cost is around about £228,000, and there is an annual subscription fee of £28,000 as well. But the expected savings in salt usage are in the region of £80,000 per year. So we're looking at a net annual saving of around about £39,000 from implementing this. And as I say, with the resilience and the health and safety improvements as well, it's a scheme that we're looking to get recommended by Cabinet.
Okay, thanks, Neil. I can't add to that. That was really extremely well explained. Are there any questions or queries? No. If not, the next and last one is the solar carport.
It is, yes, and this is one that's already been to Cabinet for initial approval for the scheme, and people will be aware this is the creation of a solar carport in the rear car park at County Hall. It's a key pin in obviously our carbon agenda and delivering that, which is one of the earlier papers that the Cabinet's heard today. At completion, it will deliver approximately 40% of the building's usage requirements, and with the solar panels on the roof will mean that 50% of all the power for County Hall per year will be supplied through the solar provision here. The reason it's come back to Cabinet is that after we've been through the procurement stage, the cost has come in slightly higher than was originally estimated. We're looking at needing an additional £423,000 to go ahead with the bid. The team who are far more expert in this than me have informed us that it's primarily around a global lithium shortage at the minute for the battery component of the scheme, and uncertainty in relation to the market around COVID. What I would say is we had in excess of 20 bidders for this project, so it certainly was a competitive bidding process. So it's not like we've had to take a higher price because we didn't get much interest in delivering the scheme. We've had companies biting our hand off to get going with the scheme, which is really good for us. But as I say, at this point, we're looking at the scheme rising in cost from around about 2.9 million up to about 3.3 million. And this is asking for the approval to go ahead with that, because it is quite a critical one for us to deliver around carbon reduction.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Yes, Nick Oliver.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I suppose it's probably good news in a way that there is a global lithium shortage, because that probably means that there's a lot of work going into battery technology around the globe, and we are beginning to take climate change seriously. So, but on a more specific point, I think this is a flagship project for us. If we're to achieve our ambitions, we need to demonstrate that we are taking it seriously as well. This is our biggest building, I think, in the council's estate. So it's really important that we do this project, and I think it sends a signal in terms of our own use of energy, but it also in terms of transport as well. If we're to achieve the ambitions, transport is a significant contributor to emissions, and we should be doing everything we can to lead by example and to try and demonstrate that electric cars are a good choice now, and we should. So I think this is a project, and I wholeheartedly recommend.
Yeah, good. Thanks for that. Any other comments, questions? Okay, Neil, thank you ever so much for that. I'm just going to go through the recommendations. The first one is around the Northumberland Line ground investigation works, which is to approve a funding allocation of £870,000 to complete the off-track ground investigation works to be funded from the Northumberland Line allocation in the approved capital programme. It should be noted this requested allocation could be reimbursed or reinstated to the capital programme depending on the outcome of the ongoing discussions with the Department of Transport within the context of Project Speed. 2, the 189 Moor Farm roundabout section 106 improvements, to agree that funding contribution of 210,000 for the highway improvements to be added to the council's capital programme. This was from a development at Chapel View in East Cramington to be used to improve safety on the 189 southbound approach to Moor Farm roundabout. The third one is the Winter Services Fleet Systems Enhancement. Recommended that we approve the capital requirement of 228,000 for the purchase of enhanced gritter operating systems as a revenue saving, delivering annual savings of 39,000. And finally, the solar carport at County Hall, we need to find this extra additional capital funding of 422,000 to support the project, the storage, EV charging points and so on at County Hall. It should be noted that a subsequent bid will be made to the European Regional Development Fund, ERDF, which may result in up to 50% of this additional cost being grant funded. Let's hope it is. Is there a proposer for those? Councillor Wiermer, seconded by Councillor Oliver. Thank you very much. Now, we need to vote. Can I ask you to put your hand up if you agree? Okay, I think that's everyone. So thank you very much indeed for that. Thank you, Neil. I have no urgent business, and I haven't been told that there is any, so I now need to go to number 10, which is the exclusion of the press and public. Members, can we agree to exclude the press and public for the reasons outlined in the report? Yes, so therefore, may I ask then, please, Karen, that the live stream is ended at this point, and can I thank people who have joined this meeting? Thank you for joining us, and I hope you found it interesting. Thank you.
Can you just bear